2017, I was in an area, and a really active area. I've been working this area for years. And actually driving along the access road, I was looking for footprints for something had crossed over the road. And I did. They were fresh prints. So I pull off the road where I found the best prints I was going to cast and document. I took my handgun off, put it on the four-wheeler, took all my material out. I'm out here measuring, writing down measurements and taking pictures and everything like that. And I'm so engrossed in these footprints. About that time, I got a whiff of something. And Lord, man, somebody's septic system is overflowing. And it dawned on me, well, I'm way out here in the middle of nowhere. There's no septic system. And I happened to look up on the southern side of my four-wheeler, which is not but 40 feet away from me. This thing was standing there. It was still in the area when I was pulled in. And it was standing there looking at me. And I'm down here kneeling down by these prints, I'm getting ready to cast. And I'm looking at my four-wheeler, and it's on the other side of my four-wheeler. And this thing was huge. And I'm thinking, should I run and go get my handgun or just stay here? But I sat there and I just looked it in the eyes, and it looked at me. Then all of a sudden it kind of sniffed the air, grunt, and started walking off. And I'm sitting there and it dawned on me, I'm gonna videotape this. So my wife had got me a flip phone because she didn't trust me with a regular iPhone, Oh cheapy. So here I am, I'm running down here and I'm getting it ready like that, and all of a sudden I'm filming. And I'm watching it as it walked off over the edge of the ridge. So I close my phone up, I jump on my four-wheeler, go back to my truck, I go home, and I'm excited. And my wife goes, you got something on film, didn't you? I said, yes, I did, I got it. I said, just like the Patterson-Gimlin film, it's there. I download it like that, and I pop the video on, and my wife goes, that's a real nice shirt I brought you. In the confusion, I had flipped the phone around and was filming myself. And I tell this story because it actually happened. It's not because I was stupid or nothing. It was because I was so excited. I didn't pay attention to what I was doing. I had these big old alligator tears, and I had to get a little beach towel. But yeah, things happen. But that was the most thing. Every time I tell the story, just like right now, if I had a heart monitor, you could tell my heart's beating. I can smell him. I got that whiff when I was telling the story. My hair stands up. That was one of the things. I was scared to death. I didn't know what to do, really. But it didn't see me as a threat, I think. That's why it walked up. Later, me and my former partner went back and where I was kneeling, and we took a tape measure and measured where I saw the top of his head. He was 9 foot, 21-inch footprint. I did a sketch of what I saw, the face and everything, right after that, because it was still all fresh. I did a sketch because I went to Heartland Art School for a little bit, so I got some artistry. And I did a sketch, and it's at Cliff's Barrickman's museum on the wall. What I saw, Goliath. That's Goliath.
Can humans and Sasquatch become mutually used to one another? This is the question at the heart of a concept called habituation. In a scientific sense, the term habituation is defined by the American Psychological Association as growing accustomed to a situation or stimulus which diminishes its effectiveness. Habituation does not always occur in the same way. Several factors can influence how quickly one becomes acclimated to a stimulus. Habituation is not always a singular process. Many variables can influence how rapidly habituation happens, whether a person is becoming accustomed to a new annoyance, a novel sound, or even an undiscovered animal making cautious attempts at human contact. There are various elements of habituation that are worthy of consideration. One such element is change. If a noise is growing louder or more frequent over time, then it may be more likely to attract notice. Conversely, a regular repetitive stimulus, whether sound, appearance of food, or any number of things, may after a while be considered regular and not worth noting. Then there's duration. If that noisy neighbor's loud banging were to stop and start unpredictably, you'd be less likely to become used to it. Also, one must consider the duration with which a certain activity is applied. For example, if a sound is heard only once, or for a brief period of time, it may quickly sink from memory and lose all significance to the one hearing it. Frequency likewise plays a role. If someone were to wear the same perfume every day, they would be more likely to stop noticing the scent earlier than if it were worn only on special occasions. Researchers even outside the realm of Sasquatch studies have noted that frequency is of tantamount importance. In order to become comfortable or habituated to given stimuli, one must first become familiar with it. It's intriguing to note that very intense stimuli leads to slower habituation. Sometimes habituation will never occur. In some cases, such as deafening noises like a car alarm or a siren, that makes sense. A car alarm wouldn't be very effective as an alert if people stopped noticing it after a few minutes. The more intense the stimulus, the longer it will likely take to become accustomed to it, if it happens at all. A shock to the system will be less effective in the art of habituation. More subtle approaches are supported not only by anecdotal stories in the world of Sasquatch, but also by peer-reviewed research. When discussing Bigfoot, the term habituation is often used to convey a scenario in which humans perceive the ongoing presence of the creature in a given location. This is established by a property owner or researcher frequenting or living in a known active area, sometimes being so specific as to wear the exact same clothing each time to create a consistent visual impression. In addition, this is where the practice of gifting comes into play. Items such as food or visually attractive trinkets might be left in easily discoverable locations, and when these items frequently disappear, the question then becomes who or what is taking them.
From what I understand, it's long-term witnesses, activity that happens around someone's property, and it happens over a period of years. And so then you can start building up different patterns and things that have happened that are Sasquatch related.
I think habituation is kind of a two-phase thing. It's our habits of how we live in our area, how we respond to it. But as I've kind of studied that a little bit, it also, there seems to be a desensitization of it. You know, when you're in and doing something over and over and over, you become more, more desensitized to it. I give an example. I grew up living next to a railroad track when I was younger. And I mean, it's our modular home was literally within 30 feet of the railroad track. And when we first lived there, it's like that's all you hear. Then after a period of time, you almost don't notice it. I mean, when the train goes by. But so you become more familiar with your atmosphere, the area you're in. So that's kind of the way I see habituation, is this study of that, how you interact.
That's when you take and you gift them, whether that is gifting shiny objects, stuffed animals, something for them to pick up, or gifting them some kind of food.
A treat.
Some kind of treat. I don't encourage anybody to have habituation close to their house, especially if they're doing any type of treats or anything else, because I think they would have a tendency to bring them in and be beating on your door wanting something, so I wouldn't encourage that. But we have one area that has been habituated twice over a period of better than 10 years, and both times they done the very same type of things. That's ones that we call Oscar and Felix, because one's real messy and one's not. Edie Cato was the first one that really started habituating that site, and she got amazing things out of it. That's where we learned by her habituation that they understand what you're saying, because she would ask them to do certain things, like to bring the trash back up so she could pick it up, and they started bringing it back up to her. And people look at you and go, meh. But hers was hid down in the middle of the woods inside of a Tupperware container with a lid on it with bricks on top of that. Things would disappear, and everything that she put out, she'd write a date on it. She would write the IBRO on it, and she would date it. Like a bag of animal crackers, that bag may be gone 2 or 3 weeks. Then once it's back in the container.
It's empty.
It's empty. I'm back in the container.
They
She
want
goes,
more.
well, they want more. That's when they want more. When they brought it back is when they wanted more. She would gift them balls, little something shiny or a little ball. And it may be gone. I think she had stuff that was gone up to a year and then would reappear and be all muddy and smashed. And she's got one ball that's got permanent imprints of fingers in it, where it just had smashed that ball so much.
Habituation is where people are sharing their environment with the family of Sasquatch or a Sasquatch, or they're supposedly living on the same properties. I don't really know. I mean, a lot of times when you hear people talk about habituation, they talk about it in spans of years. So I would associate it with that, but I would figure if even a year would still be living there. So.
Habituation, and what I'll say is this: habituation is, where people have the idea that if they sit there and work an area hard and long enough, that they'll get the Bigfoots comfortable enough to come forward and possibly interact, maybe at a good distance, or maybe by doing exchanges for things, leaving this out for that, hoping it takes it and leaves you something back. But I think what it comes to is that unless you see it, take it, and leave something in return, it's hard to say 100% that it's accurate. It could be, but I have never seen anything 100% certain that would tell me, yes, that's absolutely happening.
She had eventually moved. She moved to southern Indiana, and another guy come in, and he started habituating that side. He worked with Edie, talked to her on the phone, and he started doing it. And they treated stuff the very same way. They still opened the packages the same way. You could see that they probably used their fingernails to cut those packages open. The packages wasn't chewed open. You could tell they had been kind of cut, or it would be open just like you or I would open it up. And again, would put stuff back neat. One would be messy, one would be neat. And they still treated things the same way. And he didn't know that. He was getting the stuff and he was saying, hey, look what I got back last night. And I'm looking at it and going, that's awesome. That's wild, because that's the same way they done when Edie was doing this. They done it the same way. They're still treating these things the same way.
In 2022, a woman named Suzanne Ferencak was interviewed by a local news station after capturing audio of what may very well be a Sasquatch right at home on her property in Columbus, Ohio. Suzanne has been involved in the search for Sasquatch for years and had her own sighting in 2013. She would describe a large, hairy creature standing approximately 7.5 feet tall. Suzanne's sighting would take place within the Heartland, where her present-day research is still centered, Ohio. Suzanne's position as a Bigfoot field research organization researcher has afforded her many opportunities to continue the search for Bigfoot, and her own encounters with potential habituation give further credence to the idea that the practice, when applied to the Bigfoot question, may be more than just a novel idea.
I guess you could call me a long-term witness now. Things started happening around our house in 2013. I had a road crossing nearby, but then we had two big, huge howls that happened a couple weeks after the road crossing. And then there was just tons of knocks for the next year or so. And then there was another sighting on our property that same day, end of the summer, 2013. And then I had a Bigfoot approach me on our porch in the fall of 2014. And then there was another one that was down by the power line in 2015. So then there was a period of years where there was nothing that happened. And then things started picking up again in 2022 when I recorded some howls. And I've been hearing knocks on a fairly consistent basis since then. So I guess that's what's happened around our house, and that's, habituation, long-term witness. It's just what I'm hearing and what I'm studying.
So the next question was going to be about cases or locations or sightings where this kind of thing has taken place. And since we're talking about this, I'm just curious. The guy that moved in after she left, was there activity happening, and that's what sparked him to do the gifting?
You got to understand, he was there 24/7. 365 days. He was there all the time.
He camped there. He
camped there.
Camped.
He lived with them pretty much.
Yeah, and lived there all the time. Homeless by choice.
Yeah.
He's homeless by choice. He does YouTube. So, yeah, he did YouTube, so he was homeless by choice. He slept in a tent, and he was coming through Indiana, and he had met us once, but he was coming through Indiana, and he got a hold of me and said, "Hey, I'm coming through Indiana. Is there some place that I could go that I might experience something?" So I told him where to go. I gave him the site, said, "Go here. Go to this location, go to this campsite." That was in June, I think. I think that was June. He left then. He left that year. Thanksgiving morning is when he left, because he started having activity the very first night, and it intrigued him so much that he stayed.
Yeah.
He went home for the winter, come back, and then didn't leave for almost 2 years. He stayed there. He would switch from campsite to campsite, location to location in Indiana, but he spent most of his time in that location.
And he did habituation. He got a lot of interaction with them, and he'd always say, thank you. He was very polite. He said they were polite. He said they always let me know they're coming in.
Yeah, he's the one that,
but I never know when they leave.
Yeah, he's the one that we was sitting there one night, and he goes, and he told me, he goes, they're pretty polite. What do you mean they're polite? He goes, I hear them walk up. He goes, we hear them walk up, but we don't hear them leave. So how can they do that? If they don't make any noise leaving, why do they make a noise when they come up, besides to let you know they're walking up here?
I mean, I knew some locations where people would leave food out for them, and they would allegedly come. And there was one older woman, and I believe she was down in like Coshocton, Muskingum County, right in that area, where, she was leaving some things in jars out, and she claimed that they were taking the food. But once again, there wasn't enough evidence to back it. But it's basically a gift exchange. And, I don't know. Like I say, it's just not one of my cups of tea, let's say, because if I see it, if it's seen and it happens, then I'd be behind it. Could it be? Of course it could be possible. Anything's possible, because the great thing about Bigfoot or Sasquatch, it's an ever-learning cycle of ideas and evidence.
There's a certain logic to the idea that Bigfoot would want to remain in a stable environment. A number of reasons could play into this, including a surplus of food, shelter, and water, as well as a natural cycle of birthing and death. If there is no immediate threat and the resources are abundant, there's no biological reason to move. If this changes based on seasonal differences, human interference, or a natural diminishing of resources, animals in general tend to relocate to survive.
It has to be food related. If they have everything they need, which they do in eastern Holmes County, they've got waterways, they've got plenty of deer for sure, and there's a ton of wildlife that is in abundance without any other large predators to go after them. So why would they leave? If they, feel safe and they feel covered, then, there's a good reason for them to stay there.
I think that goes back to, I mentioned a while ago, the gentleman we met in Columbus. I think they have a sense of safety just as much as we would. And that's why I think you see, there's certain areas you go to that we research that it's kind of like you get that sense or that understanding that, that's where they stay. They're in that area. And I think that's because it's safe. It's, they can monitor what comes and goes in that area. And I think that's when you see a lot of I know there are aggressive reports out there. I did not know of any in Indiana that I know of. They may be out there because a lot of people don't like to talk. I think sometimes it's that territorial thing, as I mentioned a while ago. They're like, okay, you're too close here, you're done. And a thought just hit me that an area we're actually going back to this fall, the gentleman has a huge property. It's 2,200 acres. And he had an area that he went and cleared for us, basically to give us an easier path out to this other area. And he went out and dropped several decent sized trees off the side of the trail to make it easier to get up to this other area. And that afternoon, my son-in-law and about 3 others had gone out there, hiked over to the area, and he had tied off ribbons so we could stay on the trail. And they climbed this hill, come back down. I thought, man, this just really get that sense that this is a squatchy area. So I got back, I'd gone with someone else because we were doing some casting that afternoon. When I got back, my daughter goes, "You're going with your son-in-law tonight." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You need to go where they went today." I said, "Oh, okay." So we went out that night and we traced the ribbons, followed them. We got to this point before you go up the hill, and 2 of those trees had been pulled over, blocking the trail, completely blocking the base of that trail. And I'm not sure I'm all in on structures and things, but there was a very interesting twisting of branches and things that was in front of these 2 stumps. And they knew for 100% that those trees were not there earlier, because 2 of the girls that were with them didn't want to climb the hill. So they sat there on the stumps that were on the side of the trail, waiting until they came back down, and then they all headed back to base camp. That's probably the one that sticks out to me the most as a personal experience of like, okay, don't go any further.
The only thing that would cause it to stay in one area would be an unlimited food source where they're not being detected, or that there's a pregnant individual or a newborn individual that needs to be cared for, or a sick individual. That's when they're going to put their feet in the ground and take a stand, and if something goes down, they're going to defend it.
I think they're like anything else. I mean, I believe they have a home area that they stay in, that clan stays in. Unless they get pushed out of that area, they're comfortable in it, they know it, they know where they can hunt, they know where they can stay hidden at. And the only time that one leaves, which what I was always taught, was the teenage male is the one that's shoved out, just like a lot of animals is shoved out, and they have to go find them a female somewhere. They're the ones that will end up running down across the road or whatever, or get out there and get into something that people report, and it's because they're out traveling trying to find them a new place. But other than that, it's like the one clan we've been messing with. We know that they've been there well over 10 years because they're there all year round. The habituation, they do the same thing. We've seen the large prints, we've seen the baby prints. In some of the areas, we've seen baby prints. 6 months later or whatever, you see a larger print, but still small. You know, so you see that the babies are growing up, that they've had young ones, they're growing. You know, so, you know, we've seen that. And a lot of that is because of the habituation and being in that one area. Yeah, and where they're often.
See, that's a question I've been trying to contemplate for a long time. I don't know. The only thing I can think of is maybe if it's a readily available food source there, that's something that stays there, that they can have year round. That's the only thing I can think of. Maybe it's just high in food, or maybe some people have an area where maybe they're coming in and having young and staying for a period of time till they're old enough to move on. That's about all I can, that's just my theories.
In examples of habituation, a variety of behaviors have been noted. Some examples, such as what appeared to be a habituation scenario in Small Town Monsters' Bigfoot project, and subsequent years since filming, reveal that there is not only a pattern related to certain months of the year, but also a pattern of years between interactions.
I've tried over 12 years now to figure out what a pattern would be. No, I can't find a pattern to it. There's been activity in the wintertime, there's been activity midsummer. I do seem to hear things regularly towards the end of April. And then I do hear a few more knocks in the fall, but it's been hanging around for all 4 seasons. So I can't really find a pattern to it. Now maybe, you know, people are out in the spring mushroom hunting, turkey hunting, and then in the fall, you know, it's deer season, so there might be more opportunity for people to encounter it. But, you know, there's stuff that happens in the wintertime too, so I'm around to see it or hear it.
I really haven't. It seems like a lot of the Indiana reports move more towards the fall. Now, but like I said, they go back so far, 50, 60 years. It's hard to establish a pattern, but a lot of them the majority of them are that fall time period, October, November, December.
I think it's consistent. A lot of people say that spring and fall is when there's more activity. I think that's more activity from human than it is from them. That's because in the winter, people aren't out there in the winter, and they're not out there in the middle of summer when it's really hot and sticky. Yeah. People tend to kind of stay away. In the spring and in the fall, everybody in there, around here, you get in the spring in Indiana, they mushroom hunt these woods so hard, there isn't an area that isn't covered in the spring, people looking for mushrooms. So yeah, you're going to get people turkey hunting and going back out hunting. So I think that's why we get more reports. Come the fall, everybody's hunting again. Every woods in Indiana is trampled during deer season. So I think that's when there's more reports.
The ones that I've heard of, they lived on a property constantly year round. That they would I'm trying to remember names, but I remember was it Mary Green? I think it was Mary Green was one of them that supposedly had quite a bit of habituation on the property, where they would even come up to the door, and like they were family friends, like they grew up together. I think that was her name. Don't quote me on it, but I do believe that was it.
Well, I would say this. If they're there all year around, something's not right. If they're coming once in a great while, maybe every few years, maybe yearly, maybe every 5 years, that makes more sense. So, because one part of Bigfoot's success, in my honest opinion, is their willingness to just be nomads, wanderers. A wanderer never has to rely on one spot. A wanderer keeps finding new sources. Something that's successful keeps finding new food sources, and it keeps doing it. And then as it circles back around in an area, hey, I remember that apple orchard over on 113 in Elaria. Let's see if it's still giving food and things like that. Then if it isn't, guess what they do? They don't sit there and whelp and cry. They move on to the next location. Something that has to rely on one spot won't be successful. That's why I think Bigfoots are constantly moving. I think on both ends more the Sasquatch than the humans, because if the humans, really truly feel like they're habituating with these things, and if it's real and it's really going on, it could get violent. You never know. Anything's animals, big things like this can be unpredictable. Where the Sasquatch, I think, no matter what, they can just get up and leave. Like, for example, if you're yapping too much, they can just leave and say, wow, that person doesn't shut up, I'm out of here, and they just move on.
It seems self-evident that habituation with the Sasquatch would pose imminent risk. Presuming that Bigfoot is a physical creature, then we know from experience that creating a situation where a wild animal becomes comfortable with humans can ultimately lead to a dangerous situation. Either the creature itself pushes boundaries with new and unfamiliar humans, or they become too expectant on gift exchange. Humans can become endangered through this, as wild, non-domesticated species are always unpredictable, and also violence could ultimately occur if the creature becomes unhappy, if gift exchange or familiar behavior is not kept up continually. Stories abound of seemingly docile animals suddenly becoming dangerous, attacking and even killing human beings they had previously been comfortable with. It's a sad reality, but any person considering undergoing a study in Sasquatch habituation would be wise to bear this in mind.
Well, I suppose if the person living there wants to take out a gun and try to shoot it, then, was it Grover Krantz, Dr. Krantz, that said you better reload? There's no safe thing you can do to try to mess with the Sasquatch. They're large, they're in charge, they're going to do what they want. I wouldn't mess with it. I think that's the danger, is if you try to mess with it.
I think only if you habituate close to your home.
Yeah, close to your home.
And it's not a danger, but they might be more, and I don't want to use aggressive either, but they might be more apt to come up to your house.
Yeah.
If you don't have something out there that they want,
Yeah.
especially if it's food.
And it
drinks.
depends on what you're habituated to. If you're going out there and giving quite a bit of food, yeah, that could be harming them. Whatever you're feeding them could be giving them harm. But if you're going out there and giving them just little treats here or there, and it's not all the time, then it's a treat. It's probably not doing a whole lot to them. No more than what they're picking up out of the trash or whatever,
Whatever they do.
Whatever they do. But we've also learned by doing that, they only take what they need. It's like if you take a dozen donuts out there and leave on a stump at night, they'll open those donuts up, but they may only eat 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah.
They won't take the whole thing,
And leave the rest.
but there'll be clearly just 3 or 4 donuts that's gone. And you can see the handprint on it. So that's what they do.
I think it could if you didn't respect it, and I think that's probably only going to come from the researchers that recognize what an area is. Because I think there's people that have experiences a lot, but because not on their mind or in their thought process of what it is they're hearing, what they're experiencing. But I think it could, if someone was overly aggressive, as far as humans, as far as us, if we're overly aggressive in an area, just like the story I just mentioned with the trees, the guy that was kind of serving as our leader that night, we got to that point and a few of us were like, well, let's just keep going. He's like, no, we're done. This is our sign to stop right here. So I think it could be, but I don't think I don't want to say you won't hear about it, but because obviously if some big thing happened, it's going to be news. But I think your serious researchers and the people that are curious are going to respect that a little more than just you have your gung-ho guys that want to go out and shoot it, that kind of thing.
I think so. And the only reason I say that is, like, even if the family's friendly with a group of Sasquatch, it's like they get used to human beings. I'm afraid that they may get stride to someone else's property that isn't so likely to have them stay, and they might get shot at or something along those lines. I mean, they're technically, it all depends on who you ask. Like me, I still think they're an animal. So I would say, just like any wild animal, you'd have to give it a fairly wide berth. I'm afraid that, like, somebody, might mistake something they're doing as being friendly, and it may not be, and they could wind up getting hurt.
We had a bundle of bananas one night. They took one banana off that bundle. That bundle was sitting on top of a stump where there was just enough room for the bundle and a battery-operated disco light that Edie had set up there. I go back to Edie a lot because in earlier years, we did a lot.
Yeah.
But she had a battery disco light and a bundle of bananas that was sitting on top of a stump. That's about all the room there was. We heard one scream, so we walked back there. It's maybe 100 yards back in the woods. We walked back there. There's one banana gone off that stalk. Disco light's still there, just one banana gone. So I don't know what could take one banana off of that stalk and not knock the rest of them off there or do anything, but it was completely gone. So again, they didn't take the whole bundle.
It's easy to assume that an undiscovered animal would be inclined to explore its surroundings in the same way that classified creatures do. Habituation plays a key role in this exploration, helping animals to select appropriate behaviors. Habituation is a key mechanism for filtering out unnecessary sensory input, allowing the animal to focus on more critical information. For example, black-tailed prairie dogs become habituated to the sounds of non-threatening humans, ceasing their alarm calls to conserve energy, according to published studies. Harbor seals may become habituated to the calls of non-threatening orcas, but remain sensitive to calls from dangerous orcas. Wildlife in national parks may lose their fear of humans after repeated exposure, allowing people to approach closely. This point invites sobering speculation, for if Sasquatch reach a level of fearlessness with humans, only to be threatened in some way, what might they be capable of doing in retaliation?
I think the Sasquatch is, one could break off, like maybe like a young adolescent male could break off and find his own area. It's hard to tell because, unless we're seeing them all the time, again, it's hard to develop a pattern about it. But I do think, it seems like when a juvenile, maybe like a subadult, they're more vocal, they're a little more curious, and they move in places that maybe the older ones don't. That's when you start catching a lot of reports. So I think it depends on who's out and about and why.
I think a little bit of both, but I think because there are areas that we research that you see a lot of the same patterns, it's not like you could set your clock by them, but they have decades of experience in these same areas over and over and over, activity-wise. And so I think there are pockets that are like that. Now, I think Indiana is more of a travel through area because I think that's why the reports are so scattered.
No, I think they had been coming through the areas all along, and I think as they are young Sasquatch, their parents take them to areas and instill in them, this is an area of food. So as generations go on, and let's just say it's an area in, we'll just say Muskingum County, where there's 500 acres, it's been the same family and no one goes back there, and then all of a sudden one family member decides to put a cabin back there. They're going to come back and check it out, wonder what's going on, touch, feel, whatever, and if they interact with people, you know, that's possible too, because they still consider it a comfort zone until something goes bad.
I think we've encroached in so much of their area that they're moving into like society. And I actually think they're coming a lot closer, a lot more frequently than people think they are. Like I said, in Ashland, the lady was a fitness studio, and she came outside and saw them digging in a dumpster. So it's like, and that's not out in the woods, that's pretty close to the city. So I think that's what they're doing, is they're moving in just because we're encroaching.
I think they've been here.
Yeah, I think they've been there.
Yeah.
I think the areas that they're in, like the one area that we're talking about, habituation, there were several years there that nobody was doing any habituation on it. I just couldn't dedicate myself to go out there that much to actually do it. So there were several years that nobody was habituating that, but as soon as the one guy started, they was immediately taking it.
But there was interaction with them in that area.
Yeah, there was
before the habituation ever started.
there was action that went on. There was interactions there all along, whether we was habituating it or not. Yeah. There was activity that's always been there.
In his book, Impossible Visits, investigator Christopher Noel relates an account that captures the delicate nature of the habituation relationship. In 2005, a young female Sasquatch began making return visits to a rural homestead in Kentucky. The woman of the home saw the juvenile creature and called out to it in a high sing-song voice, repeating the same invocation each time. She had no luck attracting the frizzy-haired, barrel-chested entity during the day, but at night she had incredible success. Singing her welcoming song, she would leave a paper plate of pancakes near the edge of her backyard pond and watch as the visitor emerged from the forest, usually about 20 minutes later, to receive the gift. Footprints were routinely found at the pancake site, impressed more deeply into the ground than those of a 200-pound man. Eventually, the family contacted the BFRO, which obtained infrared footage of the juvenile Bigfoot, reaching out to take the familiar plate of pancakes, revealing a thick frame and musculature reminiscent of a gorilla. Noel also profiles 5 different families that have reported ongoing interactions with Bigfoot in North Carolina, Oklahoma, upstate New York, and Texas. In most of the cases, activity has been acknowledged for decades, touching many generations within each family, and becoming so normalized that pet names are used to describe the mystery primates, such as the hairy kids in the woods, the shadow people, the feet, and even personifications like Mama and Junior. In some situations, elaborate gifting scenarios are described. In others, the creatures engage in vocal mimicry of their human neighbors. And for one of the families, the presence of the creature became a baffling nuisance, as it apparently delighted in slapping the side of the house at all hours and making intimidating huffing sounds. In a similar fashion, Julie Scott, in her 2010 book, Visits with the Forest People, devotes 91 pages to a recollection of her family's experiences in a rental home on the Washington coast, interacting with a group of Sasquatch over a series of months. Many track photographs are included in the book, along with shots of the rainforest terrain and descriptions of close-range sounds and sightings that boggle the mind. And then, There's the supremely astonishing story of Dora Bradley, as retold by Tom Powell in his classic Sasquatch book, The Locals. Powell interviewed Bradley in 2002. Growing up in the early 1960s in rural Missouri, Bradley assumed everyone had Bigfoots in the woods around their home. She did, and they annoyed her. As one of 8 children, she often slept close to an open window with no screen. And there were several times when she awoke to feel a large, leathery hand on her chest. For whatever reason, she was not terrified, but simply bothered by their smell, and even as a child, she reasoned that if the creatures wanted to hurt her, they would have done so already. Incredibly, she also recalls playing with a juvenile Sasquatch along with her brother and another acquaintance when she was 7 years old. Dora remembered the creature playing rough and smelling terrible, but things were only getting started. According to Dora, she and her brother were taken out of their room one night to a cave where they witnessed a deceased infant Sasquatch being buried. The mother of the baby pulled Dora into an uncomfortable embrace before another Bigfoot carried her back home. She vividly recalled, "I was like a football in its arm. It took big steps so gracefully." It wasn't until she was a young adult that Dora realized her experiences were extremely unusual, and she could only guess that since she was deaf, the Sasquatch felt some sort of compassion toward her. It's an extraordinary account that author Tom Powell treats with great respect. If authentic, it's certainly among the most remarkable human interactions with Bigfoot ever recorded. A display of full cross-species acceptance, perhaps even affection.
Yeah, there's a report that B. Mills worked on in 2016 where the family was basically terrorized by one of these, and the homeowner took a gun out and shot it. And one of the things that happened after that was every single game bird that they were raising was stomped to death with blood and guts all over the barn. And, stealing of, farm animals, all that, screaming. It wasn't until she got there that the situation calmed down, and she just kind of helped everybody calm down. But yeah, I don't piss off a Squatch. It's not going to go well for you.
Kentucky, yes. You have sites that, people that have gone years with gifting sites that, they set things out. You were talking about railroad crossings and things a while ago. There's one story that was shared with me that these people were gifting, and they started getting railroad spikes left, in this area, and the closest railroad is like 5 miles away. So it's, that's not something that just a random person would pick up and carry around with them and then decide to set down. So it makes you one of those curious things that, like, oh, this is interesting. And this same property I mentioned, this big property we're going back to in the fall, we were there a couple years ago, and over in one particular area of the property, we kept hearing it sound like a cow. And people were trying to brush it off. Oh, we're in the country. You're going to hear cows. You're going to hear horses. I'm like, I don't think so, because it was in the opposite direction of any of the properties. And we were talking about it one night at the base camp, and the property owner was sitting there, and he goes, "I'm going to tell you guys right now, do not refute these." He said, "I hear them all the time." He said, "You're hearing cows?" He said, "The closest cows is 3 miles out the driveway and across the next valley." He said, "If you're hearing cows this way, it's not from anybody around here. There are no cows this way."
Oh, actually, I did not, because I was so excited about what I had found. My attention at that time was on these footprints, documentation, because I take measurements and everything before I cast and everything, pictures everywhere like that, So my attention was on this, and no, the only thing I got the whiff of that smell made me look up. Now, I probably would never have saw it if I didn't get the whiff. Yeah, that's a habituation site. We did a lot of habituation sites, research in that area. We got a lot of evidence out of that area. We got, like I said, I got hair samples out of it that came back to gold standard, found back gold standard. Been checked by Dr. Meldrum. We got video at nighttime on the floor at that place, you know, of something standing. The next day we'd have somebody stand out there where it was standing, and it would be several feet taller and wider than that gentleman. And he's 6 foot, a little bit more 6 foot. I'm looking for the truth. I mean, what I saw and that thing walked up on me, yeah, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say that when I go out in the woods, I'm not scared. I am. Because I don't know what these things are actually going to do to me, you know. Yeah, I'm cautious. But if I'm in an area with people and stuff like that, my focus is on my people and not myself. I got one of the best crews in the world. And I don't want to get one of them hurt or even anything happen to any of them.